it's a pleasure to see so many teachers, so many colleagues interested in this topic that is really great, okay? UDL, Universal Design for Learning, that's so good. You can tell me in the chat box if you are teachers or coordinators. Let's see what you teach, if you teach primary or teenagers. Okay, right. Good. Teachers, coordinators. All right. Primary, secondary supervisor. Wow. So good. That's great. That's great. Okay. Okay. So today we have two great sessions. All right. One more minute so that more people can join us. Right. And this is being streamed, I guess. So welcome everybody. Okay. All right. Mexico. Yes. Primary teacher. Hello from Spain. A secondary school teacher. Good. Yes. A lot of people from Peru and Mexico and Poland also in the morning session. Very good. All right. So this has so far been a very successful event. You've had the chance to listen to experts talking about agency, about this generation AI, about expression, ways of getting your young children to perform and to speak better. And today it's inclusion. It's universal design for learning. And we have two great speakers, two experts, really. Okay, so let me welcome here. Before I welcome the speaker, the first speaker, let me remind you that you will get your certificate of attendance, okay? And together with your certificate of attendance, you will get your virtual goodie bag. There you will find the recording of both sessions. You will have the PowerPoint files and resources, the little book of UDL. That's great. Give us some time because this requires time, okay? But if after 2 weeks you haven't received it, please email us, right? To eltwebinars@macmillaneducation.com and we will be ready, willing to help you, okay? And also, are you curious about UDL? I guess you are, because that's the reason why you are here. So we have a special website designed to shine. And this is very important because it is a campaign where we want to celebrate, we want to show that we celebrate that variability is a key point, that variability is the norm, not the exception, and that inclusion begins with intentional design, and that is so important, and that learning should adapt to everybody, every single student. And these are the pillars, the basic principles of the universal design for learning. Okay, so if you're interested, you may go to macmillanenglish.com/UDL. Okay, now we have two speakers today. This is the plan. Both will speak about inclusion through the Universal Design for Learning. First, we're going to have Allison Posey, and Allison is here right now. Hi, Allison. How are you?
Hello, it's so nice to be here. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, everybody's writing in the chat. We may write in the chat box, but you may make questions. You may write questions using the questions and answers box, okay? Remember that Allison is going to read if she can, but if not, she will answer questions at the very end. So use the Q&A question, the Q&A box, okay? And so, Allison, what part of your job do you really prefer? Do you like the most?
Oh, what a great question. I love trying to think about how to design for learning. I love the brain science of learning and really questioning whether and how our instructional practices align with what we know about learning in the brain. So that's my passion. That's what I'm so happy you all are here to get to chat with me about today.
And to learn about all this, and it's so important so that then we can put all this into practice slowly, maybe as from Monday, maybe tomorrow, okay? So that will be great. So Allison, if you are ready, I'll stop sharing my screen and you can share yours, right?
Amazing.
Okay. Let's see. Here. There we go. Thank you. All the best.
Okay, hopefully, let's see, there it goes. You all can see my screen now. And I'm just going to pull up the chat so I also can. Great. Hello, everyone. It is just such an honor to get to be with you all today. I am Allison Posey, as was just mentioned. I like to start out that I'm first and foremost a mom. My kids are 21 and 24 now, so they're old. But I am first and foremost a mom. I am an avid hiker, so no matter where you are in the world, if I am anywhere near you, I am likely going to try to find a mountain to hike. I work at MIT and Learning Solutions where I do instructional design. So I really do try to implement UDL into the curriculum and the products and the materials that we generate. I've written a couple books on universal design for learning. I love it that much. I've been working in the UDL world for 15 years. Actually, now that it's 2026, I can start saying 16 years. It's getting up there. And I worked at CAST, the organization that founded UDL, for 15 years. It really was an amazing journey to get to work from educators all around the world. In fact, I saw some folks from Lithuania, Hong Kong, Australia. I've gotten to work with just, people from all around the world, and it's been amazing. And prior to that, I was a high school science teacher. So for any of you who teach secondary science, that was me. That was me as well. And I still teach courses at LaSalle University. And that's just so important to me because it really helps me work with pre-service teachers and make sure I'm also implementing all of this theory that I talk about. So I work very hard to do UDL as I also, am sharing about the theory behind UDL. So that's a little bit about me. I am on LinkedIn if any of you want to connect there and, keep our connections going. I invite you to reach out because wherever you are in your UDL journey, I welcome you. And today I get the honor to share the theory of UDL. And I'm just going to tell you, the theory is so much fun. In fact, I have a colleague who said, I was just in the theory of UDL for 5 years before I started to do anything. So we don't want you to wait 5 years before you do anything. We hope you get started with some ideas right away. But I will just say it's been such a joy for me to spend the past few weeks really thinking about those foundational theories of universal design for learning, UDL, and where it came from, because it really is a beautiful story. So there are two of us presenting today. I'm going first. I will largely speak to the theory and a little bit of practice. But then my colleague Liz, who's coming next, she is going to give you so much practice, so many practical strategies. So enjoy this theory piece. Really, try to connect to the theory, and don't you worry, there will be practice. And hopefully we'll continue to make connections between the research and practice. So I wanted to kick off today and just find out, what do you already know about UDL? And you can put either number 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat. Do you maybe not even know what the U, the D, and the L stand for, even though we just said Universal Design for Learning, but maybe you are just learning what that U, the D, and the L stand for. You can put number 2 if you've started to apply UDL a little in your work. Maybe you've heard of it, you've tried a couple things. Maybe you regularly apply UDL in your work. So that would be number 3. And then number 4, maybe you're a leader in UDL. And I still love to go and hear other people talk and share about UDL because everyone's journey is a little bit different. So let's see, we have a lot of 1s and 2s, a 2.5, that's fantastic. A 0, which is also wonderful. Welcome, welcome. For some of you, this is the very first time you heard about the U, the D, and the L, Universal Design for Learning. Amazing. A couple 3s in there. Wonderful. So there's some variability. There is a range. So hopefully we'll be able to, wherever you are in your UDL journey, it looks like there are a lot of first timers. I'm so excited to share this introductory theory with you all. Wherever you are in that journey, welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to preface by saying we don't ever do UDL to do UDL. You know, we don't want people around the world saying, I do UDL and I check it off my box. We hope that you continually use UDL to help solve a problem that you're wrestling with as an educator. And it doesn't matter if you're working with the youngest of kids to adults, maybe you're working with the oldest of adults, anyone in between, anyone who has a brain who's trying to learn something in the workforce settings, in universities, in primary schools. We can apply UDL to help us solve a problem. And the thing about education that I know you all know is there are always problems we are trying to solve. There are always students we're thinking about, or technologies we're thinking about, or school-wide changes that we're thinking about. There are always problems of practice, these problematunities, these opportunities in problems. And UDL is just a framework to help us out with that. So I never want you to feel like UDL is one more thing you have to do and you have to check it off your list. But I hope that you find UDL to be a framework to really help you out. So I thought I would start with 4 little stories, very quick stories, of what has brought some people to UDL. Why have they started to adopt UDL as a framework, this universal design for learning? So I will tell you, I came to UDL in graduate school. My graduate school professor was David Rose, who is the co-founder of UDL. And I went to graduate school in mind, brain, and education because I really wanted to figure out how to make better connections between neuroscience and education. And I had one student who I really was thinking a lot about when I was teaching. You know how some students just kind of, you dream about them, you think about them all the time, you're really trying to, figure out how to support them. So I had a student who was absolutely brilliant. He knew the brain science that we were learning so deeply, and we would have these amazing conversations about what he was learning. But every single test he took for me was completely blank. He never turned in assignments, and I couldn't figure out what to do. I was really stuck with this student. How did I knew that he knew this information, but nothing was coming out on his tests or his assessments. So I used UDL to help me think about how to design to support this individual student. Here's another story. One of my friends in the UDL world, he was a middle school English language arts teacher, and he saw a flyer up at his school that said, learn about a framework to meet the needs of all learners. And he thought to himself, I don't have a framework to meet the needs of all learners. Maybe this UDL could be helpful for me. And one of the things, I share this example because I love it, because so often in our schools, we don't have a common framework for teaching and learning. So if that's something that might be of interest to you, UDL is a great framework to do that. So maybe that's a problem of practice you're thinking about. I had a principal one time who was really thinking deeply about the learning outcomes of his school. And he said, we have all of this technology. And this was a school that had so much technology. And he said, but our learning outcomes have not shifted. So he was using UDL to think about how he could get at deeper learning because all of these technology tools were not making the impact that he wanted to. So I just really appreciated UDL is not about having a certain technology. It's about thinking about learning and different learning outcomes that we want. And UDL is largely centered, especially, and I will speak my perspective. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States, and UDL is often situated first in special education. And then we often find people say, wow, this sure would help all learners. And we say, yes, wherever there are brains, UDL can have an impact. So maybe you're coming from the position of special education and you're thinking about, we have growing student needs around engagement, around accessibility. So maybe that's what you might want to use UDL to brainstorm around. So I invite you to take a moment and just think about what is a problem of practice? What's a need for change? What's something you're thinking about? Whether it's an individual student, a framework for learning, outcomes of some sort, inclusion of some kind. Take a moment, and if you want to share in the chat, you're welcome to, or if you just want to jot down your own notes, you're welcome to. What's a problem of practice or something that you're wondering about in your own teaching and education profession, whatever your role is? Many of you are also thinking about inclusion. Great. Some of you are connecting with the idea of this common framework. Oh, maybe thinking about shyness of students. Teaching certain skills. Getting students more involved. Wonderful. Thinking about learning difficulties. Oh, thinking about students who are already very smart and doing very well in school. I would argue every student is smart, but some are already skilled in what we're looking for in schools. Amazing. Thinking about AI. Yeah. Thinking about life skills, engagement. Okay, these are great. So whatever you're thinking about, bring those problems of practice with you as you learn about universal design for learning with me, the theory, and as you get into the practice with Liz, who will be coming right after me. So there are three broad fields that really inspired the formation of universal design for learning. And I love this because there are three really different fields that are not in education, but the original founders of UDL looked at architecture, neuroscience, and technology. These three fields really were brought together by the founders of Universal Design for Learning to form UDL. And I should just say that CAST was founded by, CAST is the organization that founded Universal Design for Learning. And it was founded by 5 neuropsychologists who were working in a clinic in downtown Boston, Massachusetts, here in the US. And they were taking one student at a time. So one student would come to their clinic, and it was often a student with an extreme need, and they would develop some technology to help that student go back into the classroom. And they started thinking, maybe the problems are actually in the classroom and the inflexible design of the classroom, and not always in the student themselves. So that was an interesting tension for these neuropsychologists. And I like to tell the story of one of their early patients was a student named Matthew. And Matthew had locked-in syndrome. So locked-in syndrome is where you really have trouble moving any of your muscles. So Matthew was confined to a wheelchair and had very limited mobility. But they developed a switch that could go to Matthew's chin to help Matthew communicate. This was back in the early 1980s, back when Apple IIe was the really fancy technology they were using at the time. So they made this switch that could attach to Matthew's chin, and Matthew was able to communicate. They reduced the barrier of communication, and wow, did they find out amazing things that Matthew was thinking. So it turned out that Matthew knew a lot. Matthew was very smart and curious and motivated. His barrier was an expression. And through changing the design, they were able to tap into that potential. They were able to tap into all of those thinkings. It's just wonderful, right? It's just wonderful. So these 5 neuropsychologists eventually were able to get funding, and they formed this organization called CAST that then really brought the UDL framework to life. And yes, one of the neuropsychologists, Simonette, was at Harvard University. So that was David Rose, who I had mentioned. He was also at Harvard. Yes. And LaSalle is where, yes, I continue to teach. Several of us also continue to work at LaSalle. So let's start, we'll kind of approach each one: architecture, neuroscience, and technology. So there is this old view of design and architecture, and that's that there's a building and there's a little sign at the top of the building that says, disabled persons entrance at the rear of the building. And if we start to actually break down the problems in this design, there are many. So this is a picture, for those of you who can't see the screen for whatever reason, this is a picture of an old school building that's actually here in the Boston area. And there are lots of barriers to even just getting into this building. And you might start to think about some of them. There's a curb cut. There's a big gate that has only a very narrow entrance. Then there are two series of steps. And in Boston, we have a lot of snow a lot of the year, and there aren't any handrails or anything. They're going to be really, really slippery. And then there are some big, heavy doors. And I also just want to note there's not even a sign of what this building is. So you might not even know you're at the right building until you navigate all of those barriers and then get in. And then once you get up to the top, that's when you see this, this little sign that's kind of, hidden and behind a tree, disabled persons, entrance at the rear of the building. So right from the start, individuals are separated. And some are basically left with the feeling of, you know what? You're only welcome here if you can get in through the back. It was an afterthought. You and your needs for access into this building were an afterthought that are now in the back of the building, harder to get to, not something that we all can be included in with. And often, in the back of the building, it's not lovely, right? There are dumpsters back there, there are ramps, and you end up in the back of the building. So it can be really powerful to think about architecture and some of the barriers to access. So UDL was inspired by universal design in architecture. And this is a cartoon that was drawn by an educator who lives in the next state from me, Michael Gangrio. And I love this cartoon because I think it just gets to the idea of universal design so beautifully. There is a picture of a school with a lot of snow. So for those of you in cold areas, I know you know what this feels like. For those of you in hot areas right now, maybe this picture will bring you a little cool. So there's a lot of snow, and there's a gentleman who is shoveling the steps. And there's a student who says, "Can you please shovel the ramp?" There's a ramp right next to the steps. And the gentleman shoveling says, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I'll clear the ramp for you." And the child says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." So shoveling the ramp allows someone who may be in a wheelchair, who may have slippery shoes and need to hold on to the side rails, someone who might be pulling a suitcase, someone who might have a heavy package and not be able to navigate the steps very well. Clearing a path for people with special needs can clear the path for everyone. And to me, this cartoon is used a lot in describing universal design for learning. And it's something that can be really powerful to say, these are options and designs for everyone. We wouldn't just say only if you have a wheelchair can you use the ramp, but anyone can use the ramp or the steps because the goal is to get into the building. And the way that you do it is going to differ. And we celebrate the different ways that you may need to get into the building. And you are empowered with the choice for which one you want to use. So that thinking that's grounded in universal design and architecture is exactly what inspired universal design for learning. Because once you get into the building, hopefully through a universally designed building, you then have to handle the materials, what you're reading, what you're hearing, how you're participating, the materials and methods. And those should also be designed for access. So no one should be locked out because they maybe can't hold the book or flip the pages or see the font. We want to make sure that design is thought about from the beginning to meet the greatest range of our learners from the start. And we want to open those options up for anyone to use. It's not going to be just for a student who has dyslexia, who has ADHD, whatever these are options that are just good for learning. So it's really about reducing the labels that we're putting on students and instead focusing on the design of the environment, and the environment being the goals, the materials, the methods, the assessments that we use. So that's a lot of theory. but it truly is the foundation and the core heart, kind of the heartbeat of universal design for learning. And I've seen a lot of hearts come up. I've seen a lot of reactions, agreement. Amazing. I'm so glad this is resonating. And it's hard work, right? It's hard work to think about more than one way, but then more are able to get in. And importantly, that feeling is there, that feeling of I'm welcomed, I belong, I can do this, right? Oh my gosh, and Valerie, you said it's so simple, but we don't always think about it. So good. Okay, so we talked about architecture. That's how architecture informed universal design for learning. My passion is the brain science. So there was this old view of learning in the brain, way before we could have all the great imaging techniques that allow us to see inside the living learning brain. We had this old view of learning, and I almost don't like sharing this slide, but this was, in scientific journals at the time. They described variability as this slide has a picture of two brains. One says dyslexic and has kind of a red circle on one part of it. And the other image, and I hate this word, says normal and then has several spots. And the thing that we've come to realize with current neuroimaging techniques is that there is no normal brain. Variability is the rule, right? Variability is absolutely what we know is going to exist in our students' brains. So our brains are not a fixed thing, but they are growing and changing based on how we interact with the environment. We are learning about the power of neuroplasticity and just how malleable our brains are. It's absolutely wonderful. We don't have fixed brains that need to be fixed, where it's like this brain has something wrong and this is the right brain. But instead, there's variability. And based on the context, based on the situation, our brains can change based on how we're interacting with the environments. So there was a really great study, and I have all of the resources in the references that I'll give to you all at the end, so you can read more about this study. But this is the new understanding of learning in the brain, and that is that variability is the rule. So when we see an average, so this picture shows 4 different brains, and it shows a cross section as though you're looking in the top down on the brain, and it has a quote unquote average brain. But then when you start to see the different individuals, you start to recognize that, wow, none of the individuals match the average. The average literally matches no one because everyone's brain is so, so different, right? So it's amazing that way. So we now have this understanding of the brain science. There's not a normal brain and then where there's something wrong, but instead there's variability. It's the rule. In fact, neuroscience articles use the word variability all the time because it's not like there's this brain and it's this way and then there's this brain and it's that way, but there's just always variability, always variability. And that can feel overwhelming. I know as an educator, it was so nice to think, okay, tell me about a right brain and a left brain and I can design for that. Or tell me about, 3 learning styles and I can design for that. It's really hard to think about, okay, every student's different. How do I design for that? I don't have enough time for that. I don't have enough resources for that. How do I do this? And this is where universal design for learning comes in to give us a way of thinking about predictable variability. And one of the words that was used at the very beginning of this webinar, and I wrote it down because I was so excited to hear it, was intentionality. We want to be very intentional in our teaching to design for that variability. So UDL thinks about variability across 3 different dimensions. It recognizes in every single lesson, there's going to be variability of student engagement. Some of you mentioned student engagement and motivation as one of the problems of practice you were thinking about. Yes, we know some of you today were really excited to be here and others of you are like, oh, I guess I got to go to this thing so I can get the certificate. There's variability in engagement. We recognize that. Welcome all of you and all those different emotion states, right? Let's try to design some options to support that engagement. Let's try to recruit your interest. Let's try to make connections to things that matter to you. Let's try to think about how we can foster collaboration around some of this work. The second UDL principle thinks about how we represent information. And that's largely how information gets into our brain. So we can think about, how is information perceived? Can you see it? Can you hear it? Is it multimodal? We start to think about, is the language supported? So if you're learning in another language, there are opportunities for you to have transcriptions or captions or to get the vocabulary defined. And then the third dimension that UDL thinks about is variability in action and expression. Some of you are going to love typing in the chat and express yourselves really eloquently that way. Others of you are not going to want to, right? There'll be variability in that action and expression. And so we want to anticipate that and be able to design for that, design with a little flexibility. But the key to all of this, you all, here's the secret about designing with universal design for learning. And it often gets missed. It often gets missed. And I will say that I spend most of my job asking people, what is the goal? Because if we go back to this cartoon about the shoveling off the steps, if the goal isn't even to get into the building, then we don't need the ramp and we don't even need the shovel. But if the goal is to get into the building, we might, and this already exists, a ramp and steps, then we can go ahead and design very intentionally for that. So it's really, really important, the most important first step in universal design for learning, before you start thinking about options for engagement and representation and action and expression, is to make sure you know the learning goal. And with that learning goal, none of the options are making it too easy, because you have high expectations and you are working to get all of your learners toward that goal. And you're recognizing and valuing the variability of them by providing a couple of options to get there. And it doesn't mean endless options, because that's exhausting and no one has time for that. But it just might mean one new thing, right? A ramp and the steps, or a handrail and the steps. It could just mean one thing. So UDL, and Liz will talk about all the UDL guidelines in the next session, but UDL helps us think about our design through the lens of these three principles that help us think about that predictable variability. So it doesn't matter what technology you have. Even if you have no technology, you have a classroom with chairs and maybe a chalkboard, you can start thinking about, what's my learning goal? And what are the different ways that I can engage my learners, build their background, and have them show what they know? Oh my gosh, and yes, Nino just noted the why, the what, and the how. Exactly. Yes. So good. Yes, so you're imagining a class of 25 students with the variabilities. So now you can think about, okay, you know there's going to be variability in engagement, variability in how they build their background, and variability in their action. What could be one thing that will reduce a barrier to get to the learning goal of your lesson that day? And again, this is where I can't tell you what that is. This is where we need the expertise of you all as the educators. You know the variability. You know the barriers in your classrooms. What UDL can do is help you spark ideas for engagement, representation, and action and expression. So that's the theory of UDL. And I told you I would get to a little bit of action, and most of that's coming in the next session. But here, this is not going to surprise you. Here are the steps. The first thing you do is know the goal and make it clear and share it with students. They should know where they're trying to get to, what that success, here's where I'm trying to go. And then where there is a barrier, where oh my goodness, students are not going to read all of the text. Okay, if the goal is for them to understand the text, how can I provide one new option to support them to get to that? And a lot of times we do these things already, but we do it retrofitting it. We do it after students fail. And UDL is challenging us to do it on the front end, on the planning end, at the very start, and to open up those options for any student to be able to use. So you might be thinking of one student who absolutely needs a text-to-speech software option, but you would make it available to any student to get what they need. So it's a lot, it's a little, it's kind of what we already do, but it also can completely transform what we're doing. And I will share from my experience as a teacher. I learned about UDL in graduate school, as I mentioned, and then I went back into the classroom, and it took me at least a year to be able to feel like I was applying it regularly in my practice. So it can take some time because UDL is actually a mindset. It's about framing barriers in the environment and not the learner. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, my students are disengaged, we instead say, how is the design engaging students? My student's not reading at the right level. We flip that with UDL to say, how is the design supporting our learners to get to the reading? So that flip in the mindset is so, so powerful to use with families, to use with students themselves. So we can anticipate that variability before the learner struggles, and we continue to revisit how the design is supporting every learner to progress toward the goal. So here are some little sentence frames that you can use in your head to just get that UDL mindset going. You know, I want my learners to, and then fill in what the goal is. It might just be, you know, a 10-minute transition or something, but it's the key. And you know there are going to be barriers. You're anticipating those because you are an amazing educator doing all this work and you know your students. And then you're thinking about one new thing that you could design to reduce those barriers. And yes, it will take a little more time. It absolutely takes more time, but you will probably find you're reteaching less. More students are able to be independent. We've even heard things like teachers say, I have more time to spend one-on-one with students when I design with UDL because students can be more independent. So again, for me, that's evidence that UDL is working, and I'm all in for that. And we hear so commonly, in fact, I wrote a whole book on this. We hear all of these, but I love UDL, but, or I want to do UDL, but, or you've shown me examples of UDL, but, and we'll hear things like, okay, those aren't your students. That's not the content you teach. You don't have that technology. You don't have the time. Yes, some of it you are absolutely already doing, but it also is going to completely change the way you do everything because you're so focused on reducing barriers in the design to get to the rigorous goal that all of a sudden you will start to, you can't shift. It's like you can't go back to teaching the way you used to before. So the tips to get started, you know what I'm going to say. Make sure you know the learning goal. Start really small. Maybe you start with just a single worksheet or a single homework assignment. And use the UDL guidelines, which Liz will talk more about, those three things, engagement, representation, and action and expression. Use those to spark ideas. And those ideas are yours. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Every classroom is going to look different. But you can use those guidelines to spark ideas and then collaborate with each other, share with students, really break open the learning, how learning happens. And importantly, this is a lot of what I do in my work is we try to measure impact. How did implementing UDL have any measurable change? So you might reflect on, okay, here's how I used to do things. And now here's what I do. And here's the data. So kind of returning to that problem of practice. Because you never just do UDL to do UDL, but you use this framework to help you address a problem of practice that you have in your teaching and learning. And when things are going well, as you all know, just celebrate it. It's the greatest thing, right? But it's where there are those barriers. That's where UDL, we hope, you find to be a very helpful tool. So we invite you to take a moment and think about something you maybe learned about the U, the D, and the L, and maybe think about something you will try moving forward. I know this was largely the theory and the application's coming, but I hope you maybe have one little idea of something that you might try. So I'll give you just a moment to think about one of those things. Oh my goodness, and thank you for noting, I want to apply UDL, but I'm scared. No worries. The first thing you can start to do is just ask yourself, what is my goal? What is my goal? What do I really want my students to be able to know or do? Or what do you really want them to care about? What is that thing? And that's enough. You could do that for 2 years if you wanted to. Oh, I love this smart planning for UDL. This is amazing. Yes, designing with intention. That's exactly, UDL lets us be very intentional and proactive. Know what you want and go for it. Yes, design for it. Essential for some, good for all. This is great, you all. It does take time, but I do think it's worth it. And then the next time you do that lesson, it's already better designed. So it will take you more time the first time, but you're reteaching less. Students are more independent, and see if you find measurable changes. Often you'll find measurable changes in your students and you'll get hooked on it. It is great for all learners, young learners, old learners, anywhere there's learning. Yep. Yes, you can lesson plan with UDL. Thank you for the compliments. I would love to come be a principal. That would be so much fun. It is like personalized teaching, but it's for everyone. So you're maybe thinking about one student, but you're opening up the options for all. So it's personalized, but also for everything. So I have a lot of resources that will be shared with you. You do not have to copy all of these down, but I wanted in a very UDL way to give you some options. There are a couple books, there are a couple podcasts, and there are some other online resources like teaching guides, some co-planning guides. There's a TED Talk. So please know you will get access to all of these resources to learn more of the UDL basics. And I really thank you for being on this journey of inclusion, of thinking about how UDL can help you all in your work. And thank you for doing the most important job of all, and that's teaching our young folks or old folks, teaching and learning. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Allison. It's been great. E- Everybody's writing, thank you, thank you, thank you. So we've just got one question, and I think it's interesting. If you had to give us a practical step, but the first step for a context where this has never been implemented, what would you say is that? How would you say we can start?
Know the goal. It truly doesn't matter where you are. I've worked in museums, I've worked in workplaces, I've worked in zoos, I've worked in, you name it, at early elementary settings. You have to know the goal. If you don't know the goal, you don't know how to design. So knowing the goal is truly the hardest part. We think we're already doing it, but it is the hardest thing to be able to say, actually, this is the goal. So that's
And
where to start.
considering the barriers, perhaps analyzing the barriers.
And then you can analyze the barriers. If you
Right.
don't know the goal, you can't analyze the
No.
barriers.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you once again.
Oh, and Joanna said
Yeah.
it's the same with life, and you're right. I use UDL all the time in my life. So,
Exactly. It's not just for English, it's for everything.
it is. It just is.
Great.
So
Thank you
you all
very
are
much.
wonderful.
Thank
Thank you all
you.
so much.
So I will go on sharing my slides. Yes. Okay.
And if your solution doesn't work, I see that one comment, you try again. Keep thinking
Yeah,
about the goal.
probably.
Keep thinking about the
Yeah.
barrier. Maybe co-design with students. Yep, amazing.
Yes.
All right, I will
Yes,
stop. I could
yes.
keep
Thank
talking about this
you.
all
Thank
day.
you very,
So,
very much. Okay. So now I will ask Will or Gabby if you can please type the link so that we can have this quick poll. Have you got any questions about using UDL in your classrooms? We are here to help you. Let's see. A few minutes for you to type your questions, please. That's very important for us. All right. Great. So we are going to take Not 5 minutes, just 3 minutes, okay? To get a cup of coffee, to stretch a little bit and then come back. I will be waiting for you here, and we've got our next speaker here ready to start. So just 3 minutes and we meet again. Well, are we ready? Are we ready to go on? Yes? Have you got your cup of coffee there, ready to go on? All right. Okay, so after this great presentation, now we are going to go on with our second session. Remember that you can get started with Designed to Shine. This is our campaign through which we celebrate that variability, a word that Allison has used several times today, that variability is the norm, not the exception, and that inclusion begins with intentional design. That is so, so important, and that learning should adapt to every single student. These are the principles of UDL, and they are very, very important. If you are interested and you want to learn more, go to macmillanenglish.com/UDL. Okay, great. So now we will move on to our second talk, and I would like to welcome Liz. How are you, Liz?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, we have a great audience, a lot of people from different parts of the world, and it's being streamed as well. So welcome everybody. Welcome, Liz. You are going to enjoy this second talk. Would you like to tell us why you decided to become a special education teacher?
Yeah, I wanted to be able to reach the students in the margins who had challenges with learning in the regular way that sometimes we default to when we teach. I wanted to unlock their access to education and be able to support them.
That's so important. And do you remember your first experience?
As a teacher?
Yeah, a
Oh,
special
yeah.
education teacher.
Yes. Feeling quite overwhelmed. If it's the first memory, yeah.
And I don't know why, but we always remember that first experience. Okay, that's so important. Okay,
Yeah.
people, you are not here to listen to me. You are here to listen to Liz. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You are in good hands. The stage is yours, Liz. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. On your screen right now, you're going to see our resources for today. And because my session is designed with UDL in mind, I've provided you with a QR code and a tiny URL, as well as a link in the chat that I'm putting into the chat right now. So you can click it, it's in the chat, or you can enter a tiny URL or scan a QR code. 3 options for accessing this resource. I refer to this resource as the home base. I put together all the resources I want to share with you in one Google document that is hyperlinked with the resources. And the resources are arranged by slide order. So anytime you see the icon on your screen to the far left, it's an upside down raindrop with the outline of a house inside of it. Anytime that's on your screen, I'll let you know there's a resource in the home base that you might want to explore now or later. I'm a more is more professional development provider, not a more is less. So you're going to get a lot of information because we have a limited amount of time, but I want you to leave here, all of you leaving here with something new and something you can try. No link. I'm going to put the link in again. It's in the chat, but if you see the tiny URL on your screen, you can type that in to a separate tab on your computer or device, or you can scan the QR code. Thank you for those of you who are popping in the link. Appreciate it. I'm going to move on, but if you now need the link to the resources, it'll be in the chat. So our goals for today, UDL starts with clear, rigorous, flexible goals. I use that symbol in the upper left-hand corner, a target sign, to represent goals. Our goals, we're going to explore the structure of the UDL guidelines. We're going to comprehend some of the possibilities for UDL within instruction. And I designed today with UDL in mind. So you have options to self-regulate. These are components of UDL, making sure you have options to engage, to acknowledge how you're feeling. You please at home, sit wherever you are, sit, stand, fidget, stretch. We'll have a quick social emotional check-in. I provided you with options to understand the content of what I'm teaching with slides, resources. I'm going to make analogies. We have videos, lesson examples. And then I have some options for you to show me what you've learned. You can use the home base. There's the chat that I'll respond to and a Q&A at the end. So quick social emotional check-in for everyone who's here. This is an aspect of UDL where I'm providing you with options for individual and collective reflection. Looking at your screen, which Winter Olympic sport best represents how you feel right now? And maybe you'd like to explain why. So I'm a 2 because he's laying down and I'm tired. So much variability. It's a huge group. People are feeling all different ways. I love this. I also love the Olympics. So it's exciting to be in this international conference with all of you, and the Olympics are going on. And if you have to stop to watch the Olympics, I get it. All right, here is your definition for UDL. I created this visual definition to help you recall it and plan with UDL effectively. You start with clear, rigorous, flexible goals. And Allison did a great job in talking about what goals are. I'm going to get into them a little bit more as well. And then you're going to name the barriers to that goal. You're going to predict what are some challenges that are in the instruction and the curriculum that my students are going to encounter. We're really good as educators at naming all the things that could possibly go wrong. Just name 1 to 3. Because when we name too many things, it's too hard to design with UDL. The other component of barriers is that they are outside of our students. The barriers are not internal to our students. It's not that my student has ADHD. It's that my curriculum or my classroom environment isn't providing them with options to self-regulate, persist and sustain. It's not providing them with options to minimize threats and distractions. So the barriers are the things we can change. Then once you identify barriers, you can deliberately plan with the UDL guidelines to reduce or remove barriers. What is a UDL goal? A UDL goal is clear, rigorous, and flexible. Allison mentioned this in her talk. I'm going to use an analogy. Wherever you are today, or let's say you're going to work and you don't work remotely, and you work with some colleagues. They all have the same goal of getting to work, but the way you get there, the means are all different. The amount of time it takes you to get there is different. You might take a bus, a train, a subway, walk, bike, car, but everyone ends up at work. But we didn't all leave from the same place. We start from a different place. The goal is an overarching, clear, and rigorous objective. And we're all going to end up there, but to design with UDL means there's going to be multiple pathways to that goal. And so what do we mean by barriers? Learning barriers are outside of our students. It's not what we're going to change. But I'm a teacher. I reflect on my lessons, especially when I'm on my drive home. And sometimes I get in a rut and I say to myself, well, the reason they didn't get the lesson was because one of these characteristics in the red box on your screen. Maybe I'm thinking, oh, it's just they don't like my subject. That's why it didn't work. Or they're academically below grade level. These, when we get there as educators and get stuck, we have to pause, remind ourselves, these are excuses we're making for ourselves. These are excuses that we're saying the reason our instruction isn't working is because of something internal to our students. But it's actually our curriculum, our instruction, our environment, and it's even sometimes us as the educator. Sometimes we are the barrier through our own implicit biases. There are so many barriers, but make sure to plan with UDL. You're addressing barriers that are external to your students. Okay. And then the UDL guidelines. This icon I use to represent the UDL guidelines. It is a 1-page document. It's a framework. And if you look in your home base on slide 12, I've linked the CAST UDL guidelines. Check out those guidelines because the online version is hyperlinked. This entire document is on their CAST website, and it'll provide you with a lot of information about each guideline. I want to talk to you a little bit about the structure of the guidelines. We've got 3 principles or brain networks. Green is engagement, the why of learning. Purple is representation, the what of learning. And blue is action and expression, the how of learning. How are your students going to show you what you know? And they're arranged into 9 boxes or 9 guidelines. I'm going to highlight one with a black box. I've highlighted design options for language and symbols. So if you have a lesson that's heavy with vocabulary, you would go to that guideline, and then you could choose or look at one of the bullet points below it. Those are called considerations, and these are ways to reduce or remove the barrier to having language and symbols, having difficult vocabulary. This is one example of how the structure of the guidelines. Another way the guidelines are arranged is horizontally. The top row, you'll see the orange arrows pointing to the word access. That top row is a way for educators to really get their hands into UDL and see it. It's very tangible. It's going to provide more of a superficial access for our students. The options as you move down the graphic organizer become more internalized with the student, sometimes less visible physically, and are more of a metacognitive lift on the student. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some examples. I'm going to share a UDL goal. That's your objective, flexible and rigorous. Then I'm going to ask you guys to name some barriers to that goal. What do you anticipate would be a barrier? And then I'll share with you how I use the guidelines to reduce and remove that barrier. I have a big asterisk here though. UDL is not a curriculum in a box. So the lesson examples I'm going to share with you might work in someone else's classroom, but they might create barriers depending on the learner variability in front of you. Designing with UDL means we start with the goal and we think about the learners in front of us. So it can feel very messy because what I'm going to share with you might not work for your groups. However, it also could. There are examples of what UDL looked like in my classroom. Okay, here is my UDL goal. And I was teaching 6th grade middle school math. They're 12 years old, roughly, in the United States. Students will demonstrate the long division algorithm. And if you need a refresher of the long division algorithm, it's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And in the blue box, I have my national standards. Okay, so that's the goal. It's clear, it's flexible, it's rigorous. What are some barriers? You can put into the chat what you think are some possible barriers that a curriculum or the physical classroom environment could create when it comes to students needing to demonstrate the long division algorithm. What are some barriers to that goal? What do you think could be a barrier? Times tables, the physical possibility to check to make sure they have the correct answer. Dyslexia, misreading digits. That's a great observation. I can't change the fact that my student is dyslexic, but what I can do is plan instruction that will provide them with options to navigate the complexities of long division. Their English, lack of confidence, shy, a schedule, awareness of time. Absolutely. Subtraction. There's a lot of steps to long division. So here's what I was planning for. I thought of my students in front of me, and it's a multi-step process. So that's a barrier. It's dry or boring for most students. There's so many prerequisite skills that are required, and you have to keep your numbers in line. You have to be very organized. So here's how I planned with UDL. Okay, addressing those barriers and staying within my goal. I started by providing students with closed math problems. So they had a long division problem, but some of the numbers were eliminated and some were there. So as they worked through it, they knew if they were on the right track. These were options to help them sustain effort and persistence. And they had some choices to engage via authentic expression. So we took the long division algorithm and we made it into a series of movements. And we ended up writing a rap about long division, which I'll show you in just a moment. But in addition, I wanted to make sure I highlighted patterns and critical features. So I have color-coded anchor charts. I showed them short video clips on long division, and there was an option for them to go observe different videos of long division if they needed a reteach. And we had graph paper of various sizes to help students keep it in line and organized. We also did activities where I would demonstrate it, they would do it in groups, they would do it individually. We gamified long division so that they had a lot of entry points to this goal. Now, here is their rap that they came up with. I'm going to play the beginning of it for you. And you might be thinking, yeah, they're doing a rap and they're singing about long division. But at the end, they do the math. And I'll jump forward through this video so you can see the end as well. We won't watch the whole thing.
Lights, music, action. 1, 2, 3, long division.
Jump ahead.
Show you how to do it right now. I'm gonna show you right here. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring it down. Subtract.
All right.
Bring it down.
So you can get a sense of them working collaboratively, but in the end, they got to doing the long division algorithm with independence by themselves, paper and pencil, because they had so many entry points to the actual algorithm. All right, another example of a lesson. Here, the goal was an English language arts lesson, also middle school. Students will analyze a poem for craft and structure in preparation for a state standardized test. And my Common Core standards, my national standards, are in the blue box. What do you guys think are some barriers to this goal? Analyzing a poem for craft and structure in preparation for a state standardized test. Something as an educator, I'm held accountable to doing test prep. But I can use UDL to make it a lot more interesting and a more engaging and a better learning experience. But let's first address the barriers. What do you put into the chat? What do you think are some possible barriers for this goal? Reading comprehension, vocabulary, specific knowledge related to poetry, shyness. It could be boring. Yep. And my primary goal that I focused on was standardized assessments are really standard and can be pretty unengaging. So that's the barrier I'm going to address. If you had a different barrier, if this was your goal and your barrier was around vocabulary, you might design a very different lesson depending on the barriers you're naming. So here's what I ended up doing with UDL. I provided options for relevance, value, and authenticity. So I took an actual rap about sneakers by the artist Macklemore, and I let my students, we read it, we did a close reading of it, read it several times. I didn't tell them it was a rap. And then I shared with them the music video. So they had 2 representations of the poem. And then they had options to move through a series of centers at their own pace, where they could explore craft and structure of other poems now that they understood the craft and structure examples through a highly engaging example that we had worked through together. So there was a lot of choice. They had options for monitoring their progress while they moved through centers. And in the end, and I have on your screen now a screenshot of the poem. It's called Wings by Macklemore. They had the option, if they finished early or wanted an extension activity, to compose their own poem or design a piece of clothing or a sneaker by using text or images to demonstrate who they truly are. Because that was the theme also throughout the work we were doing with poetry. I didn't tell certain kids, here is the extension activity. The extension activity was available to everyone. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead. I'm providing you with a lot of slides so that you can look through other lesson examples, but I know time is a barrier for us. So I'm going to jump to an example of choice boards. And with these choice boards, in your home base, you have links to resources on how to build out a choice board, because a choice board is a great way to start to implement UDL that's accessible and understandable for most educators. You could make a choice board either about your content, the what, so students have options to learn the information connected to the goal through a podcast, reading, writing, partner work, looking at anchor charts. But you could also make a choice board for options for students for expressing what they've learned. So now on your screen, you can see a choice board that I've made on areas of triangles and composite shapes. So I created 7 different stations, and students would have 3 full classes to work through 6 of those 7 stations. And it's their choice menu in this sense. And they got to move at their own pace, and each station touched on the same goal, but provided them with another way of more than one way of learning the content. Make sure if you're making a choice board, all of your options align with the goal, and ask yourself, are all options rigorous? And do students need to do all, some, or one? In some cases, it's great to say choose 3 of the 4, and in other occasions, you can say just choose 1. Depends on your goal. Okay, I'm going to skip through there. Here's a quick example of how you could incorporate goal setting into your instruction with UDL. I always provide my students with rubrics at the beginning of a unit, but I don't just give them one. There's options for rubrics. They can build their own. And I've shared with you now a second rubric on your screen. If you want to see examples of rubrics I've made in your home base, I have a link to a Google folder with rubrics, because a rubric that is accessible in the beginning of a unit helps with goal setting. But when you have options for how you're going to be assessed, it makes the learning experience much more authentic. In addition, all my rubrics have a space for students to self-assess, appear to assess them, and a space for me to assess them. I also want my students to have a big picture of the year. Where are we going? Where are we in the year? So I have a chart in my room as a representation of the school year. So we revisit this every few weeks, so we can acknowledge what are overarching goals beyond just the unit. Okay. In your home base, there's also a lot of information on how to gamify your teaching, making it social, or storyfy it. These are ways to nurture joy and play. These are things I do all the time in my classroom. There are resources in your home base, ways to provide options depending on the goal. Having a take a break space in your classroom is a fantastic way to have to implement UDL. At my take a break space in my classroom, I teach art now, so that take a break space is pretty dirty. That's a barrier, actually. It should be cleaner, but I'm being authentic and sharing with you a real picture from my classroom. In that white box on the side, there are options for riddles, comics, books, reflection sheets. And going to take a break is always an option for students. They can empower themselves to go to take a break whenever they want, or I can tell them to take a break. I have 3 take a break spaces in my classroom, 1 in each corner, so that there are actually options for where you go to take a break. Okay, UDL is not just about designing your curriculum with barriers in mind. It's about being aware of your physical classroom space. So when we're designing our physical classroom space with UDL, consider the layout of your space, seating options, how are students going to access materials, any visuals you have, and your own teacher space. How is that organized? So here's a picture of my classroom. I have all my bins. They're the ones that are reachable lower on the shelf, I want my students to be able to have access to. All of my bins have both English and Spanish, because a lot of my students also speak Spanish, but they also have a picture, because getting the material doesn't mean you should have to read. That's construct irrelevant. I have a take a break space here in my classroom. It's a lot cleaner. It's the other one. Options to sit on the floor, in a beanbag, standing desks, spaces to sit alone, spaces to sit with a group. Every classroom I've ever been in has an analog clock, which has full of barriers, because the goal of the clock is to tell the time. It's great if you can read it, but if your goal is just to know what time it is, let's reduce and remove that barrier. I have a digital clock in my room. Here's a schedule that one of my colleagues made. She evaluated it and realized this is not very UDL. It was for 3 and 4-year-olds, and she was a speech and language pathologist. She then went through and added images and text. She actually took out the time frames because they were irrelevant towards the goal of the chart. The goal of this chart was students are going to know their schedule. They didn't need to know how long they were going to be in each space, because developmentally they were so young. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about a tool you could use as an option for designing with UDL. Does anyone know what this icon on your screen represents? Fastest person to type gets the gold medal. AI, okay, ChatGPT, there, you guys got so many, great. All of you win a gold medal. It's the Olympics, great. Yes, you recognize the symbol. If you don't worry. I'm not going to be talking about ChatGPT. I'm going to be talking about a different AI tool specifically connected to UDL. This is the icon for that. It's called Ludia. It is linked in your home base under slide 29. If you Google Ludia, you're going to get 3 different main things that come up. So one is game, just use the link in your home base. So Ludia is a chatbot and it's connected to the guidelines. So it's like has an umbrella over it. It's not like ChatGPT where it scrapes the entire internet. I do want to acknowledge that AI has an incredible impact, detrimental impact on the environment, and it can limit our creativity in a variety of ways. And depending on the AI server you're using, they can be unsafe. So I acknowledge that. I didn't use AI at all for this presentation, and I do use it in my instruction when I get really stuck on a student, because this chatbot, you can go in, you'll be prompted to share the goal of your lesson, your students, the barrier you're anticipating, and you can ask it for options for engagement, representation, action, and expression. And you will get feedback. The beauty of AI and what's so important is that you give it feedback. It's a conversation where you're saying that is going to create a barrier in my classroom, or I don't have that resource, and then continue the conversation. Don't just take what it says and move on. Prompt it and be aware of your biases and then the biases that you're evaluating that come up from the computer, from the AI. It's an option to use though. And in your home base on slide 29, I've provided a lot of resources around how teachers can use AI for lesson planning. And in no way am I endorsing that you should use AI to write everything from scratch. If you really want a thought partner and you're isolated and you're in a silo in wherever you are, it is a useful tool, especially if you're newer to UDL. Think about using AI like riding an electric bike. Anybody ride an electric bike? Or have ever ridden an electric bike? If you haven't, it rides like a regular bike, but there's a motor. And when you ride the electric bike, you can get from point A to point B faster, more efficiently. When you use AI, sometimes you can get from point A to point B much more efficiently. But with the electric bike, you're still in control. You're still the driver and your muscles are still engaged. You're still telling the bike where to go, just like when you're using AI. But with the electric bike, sometimes you can get over a hill that you never would have been able to get over with just a regular bike. There's also the downfall of the electric bike becoming dependent on the motor, and then you don't get any exercise. So you don't want to become dependent on AI. Okay. I am a more is more professional development provider, so I'm going to give you guys some more resources in your home base on slide 30. You have access to a variety of resources that I've created for you to use indefinitely, help explore UDL and understand how to use the framework to reduce and remove learning barriers. And I've written a book that's also linked on slide 31 of your home base. Art for All, Planning for Variability in the Visual Art Classroom. And UDL, it starts with clear, rigorous, flexible goals, but it ends with acknowledging those goals and asking ourselves and our students, did we meet the goal? And think to yourself, we wanted to explore the structure of the guidelines and we wanted to comprehend some of the possibilities for UDL within instruction. Have your students reflect on that goal. Have your students think about their progress towards your learning goals. Bookend your lessons with the goals. I have a picture of my students saying thank you to all of you, because in education, we sometimes don't get this enough. Your gratitude for everything you are all doing in education for your students. So thank you so much.
We should thank your students as well, Liz.
Oh, they're
for
great. Thank
sharing
you.
all
I
this.
will let them
It's
know.
been
Yes.
great. It's been so practical. Thank you. Everybody's commenting. You see, so useful, wonderful presentation. That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. There are two questions, okay? The first one is how can you define UDL? Is it a method, a framework, an approach?
It is definitely a framework. It's not a curriculum in a box. When you're implementing the guidelines, you're never going to try to implement all the guidelines into one lesson. You're acknowledging the barriers that you're addressing and you're planning for those barriers. So it is a framework. It is a mindset. And in short, go back to that visual definition where you start with your clear, rigorous, flexible goal. Name 1 to 3 barriers that are outside of your students. It's not that my student has ADHD. It's that my curriculum and instruction are not providing them with options to engage or to maintain focus, etc. That's one example.
Yeah.
And then we're going to design with the guidelines based on those barriers. So if the barrier is around distractibility, then I'm going to maybe go to the engagement guideline and consider options for focus, engagement, or I might go to the action expression and make sure I have options to let them show what they've learned in a variety of ways so they are more persistent.
Yeah, choice plays a very important role. And the second question is, how would you say UDL is linked to student agency?
Oh, I mean, it's built on student agency. So the end goal is that our learners have enough agency where they can come to you. They know how to design their own learning path. And my students know how I teach. They know they always have options. I don't use the term UDL with them. I do use the term barriers. When they're really stuck, I'll say, what is the barrier you're experiencing right now to reaching the goal? What is the goal and where's the barrier? So I use the term barriers. It's great to get feedback from your students around, are your needs being met? What are the barriers you're experiencing? But when it comes to learner agency, the more you implement UDL, your students come to you and say, I need X, Y, or Z to meet that goal. And if it works within the goal, it's great. It doesn't mean students can say, I'm going to opt out. Like, this goal's not working for me, so I'm going to sit over there. No, that's not an option. What we can do is think through other ways for you to learn the content or show what you know or get you engaged. And my students will come to me. They don't come to me and say opt out, but sometimes you hear this when you're learning about UDL. Oh, they're just going to choose a less rigorous option. But you are the educator providing the options. And in the end, students can create the options because they realize, oh, I know what I need. So that's the end goal is your students have so much agency. They understand how they learn and what they need to learn.
That is so important for life. It's not
Yes.
just for English, it's
Yes.
for life.
As Allison said, I apply UDL to all aspects of my life.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you very much. Please thank your students on our behalf.
Thank you. I
It's
will.
been a pleasure, and I will go on sharing a few more slides, okay? Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you. Okay. So, I hope, yes. All right. So, if you can, Gabriela, please type the link, okay? The idea is that we would like you to complete this. This is a short survey that will ask you about the neurodivergent needs that you have noticed in your classroom, okay? And this is important for us because we would like to identify how we can support you through the materials that we provide, okay? Now, don't worry because we are not going to ask you any specific questions about one particular student. This is general. The idea is we are asking you for help, okay? And for every completed response, Macmillan will donate £2 to the Global Education Network Teach for All. So please, if Gabriela can type the link to the survey. There it goes. Okay, you can take a few minutes to complete it or you can complete it later. All right. Remember that we won't be asking you to provide confidential information. That's not the aim. Okay, but we would like to help you more and more. Right. Okay. So now towards the end. Can I ask you for one more thing? Can I ask you to please type in the chat box one word that you think sums up, summarizes what you have learned today, what UDL is for you? One word. Diversity, variability, everyone, opportunity, engagement. That's so important. And what is interesting is that everything is so positive. And very often we complain about so many negative things. So this is a great key, UDL. And this key is in our hands. So that's really, really great. Thank you. Goal, mindset. Okay. We have to change our mindset very often. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation. You've been very active. It's been a great talk. Remember that tomorrow we've got another interesting day. Okay. So it's day number 10, and we expect to see you tomorrow. Okay. Again, 3 sessions, morning, midday and evening. You can choose the session that is more convenient, and we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.